Jupiter also. So unfortunately, though, those pictures didn't come out. When he got his film back, they were all blank. He goofed up something on the camera, and that rather historic trip, there are no shots of it whatsoever. It was only a couple of days after that for his 28th contact, which was a telepathic contact. Up till this time, Billy's contacts had all been with Semjase. And she contacted him telepathically and said that her base commander, whose name is Quetzal, wanted to meet Billy and wanted to talk to him. Well, Billy had not met Quetzal or any of the other Pleiadians up to this time, so he was a little surprised. And he was actually a little taken back, and he says, well, what does the big chief want to talk to me about? Have I done something wrong? She said no, he just wanted to meet him, and that he had a few things he wanted to tell him. So she says, please pay attention, and he did. And telepathically, then he started receiving, actually he says he could hear the voices right in his head, and he was listening to Quetzal. Quetzal was the base commander over all of the bases and Pleiadian action on the planet Earth. And I don't know how long he'd been at that particular position, but he said hello to Billy, was happy to meet him, and had some responses to a book written by a lady named Gloria Lee that a couple of people in Billy's group were reading at the time. And this book apparently was all about Gloria Lee claiming to have contacts with extraterrestrials. And he wanted to assure Billy that it was not true, that this lady, Gloria Lee, had not had any contacts with extraterrestrials, and it had not really taken place. So they chatted for a while and pushed thoughts back and forth, and that was his first introduction to one of the other Pleiadians. So it had been 28 contacts before this had happened, and this one was telepathic, by the way. On his next contact, Billy met Semjase, and they were talking, and this again was a ground contact. He had some questions, since now he was an interplanetary traveler. He had some questions about Venus, because in our past, quite a few UFO contactees have claimed to have been having contacts with Venus or knowing people from Venus, and Billy asked again if this was true, and she assured him that no, Venus historically, like she had mentioned before, had only come into its present orbit about 3,453 years ago. There was no life on Venus. And she remarked to him also that Venus originally, as I think I mentioned earlier, was a moon around Uranus. And 8,000 years back, it had been knocked out of its orbit by the Large Destroyer comet. It had been pushed into two other orbits closer to Earth. And then finally, at 3,453 years back, it moved into the orbit that it was in now. So originally, it was an ice-covered moon around Uranus. It had a lot of moisture on it, but was covered with ice. But when it passed close around the sun and moved into its final orbit, all that ice was greatly heated up, and it became like a cloud, a vapor of clouds all around the planet, and that's how we see it today. And for 3,000 years or so, it's been like that, where it's been very, very hot. So she gave Billy a few statistics about Venus that he could use to compare notes with other people in case someone said they knew something about Venus. She wanted him to know the vital statistics of the planet. So here's a few things that she told him. For one thing, when the planet Venus came into the orbit it was in, its rotation is much different than ours. It's very, very slow. It turns in the opposite direction that the Earth does. And a day on Venus is only is equal to 117 days on Earth. So every time we have a 24-hour day, I'd have to quickly add that up, 117 times 24. That's how many hours it takes for a day in Venus. There is no life at all on Venus of any form. There is some equipment there. They do have some equipment there, but very little because of the intense heat there. The surface temperature on Venus is 450 degrees Celsius, which is very hot. So that's just about the temperature it would take to melt lead. So, as a matter of fact, she remarked that one of the unusual features on Venus was that they had noted there that a Russian probe that had been sent there a few years before, she didn't say when, a Russian probe had landed on Venus, and when it hit, it looked, she says, just like somebody had taken something and splattered it against a metal wall. It just looked like so much solder on the ground. It had melted and just splattered right against the surface. I remember when that happened, as a matter of fact, they were the Russian satellite was shooting towards Venus, and then they just suddenly lost contact with it. So apparently what has happened is it got close to Venus, and then as it moved in and started descending down to Venus, it got too hot and just melted and just splat right into the side of the planet. At sea level, the atmospheric pressure there is 334 times greater than Earth's. The atmosphere is 87% carbon dioxide, which would be very difficult for you and I to breathe. We couldn't. It'd be poisonous to us. Oxygen exists at levels of 4.23% in the air. Nitrogen and other rare gases count for 55.47%. There's very few water vapors on the planet at all. It's all in the clouds. The pressure of Venus's atmosphere is 107 times greater than Earth's. There is actually no water on the surface of the planet to support life. I suppose at that temperature that would make sense. So it's going to be some time before the planet actually cools down and the very beginnings of life could get started there. They have the magnetic field on the planet is very low. The Van Allen girdle is very weak, and the solar wind factor, she says, is not screened well at all. At least those things don't mean too much to me, but they might to someone that's more scientific minded. She says the surface of Venus is very flat around the equator, around the center part of the planet, and there's mountains up in the higher range. The temperature is about the same day or night. There are very great differences in the wind between the low flat areas and the high mountainous regions. In the high mountainous regions, there are very high winds reaching up to about 117 meters per second. Okay. The cloud level, the vapor level of clouds around the planet, about as low as those get, are 43.17 kilometers on the average, except, of course, when they have storms and so forth there. The average mountain height on Venus averages 2.3 kilometers. She says there is life on Venus, but it is nothing like human form or human shape. She didn't say exactly what it was. It might be some sort of biological life or something on there because there was moisture at one time. But she says for the most part, if you just look up at the moon at night and see it just crater-filled and barren and so forth, that's what Venus looks like. And then if you just cover it with clouds, then that's what you have. They have to be careful, she says, also sometimes there, because on certain areas of Venus, the temperature will rise suddenly greater than 500 degrees Celsius on the surface. The mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, helium, argon, and neon gases fluctuate occasionally, and the atmospheric pressure varies from 88 to 107. So that's pretty incredible there. So Venus is a planet that used to be a moon, has now become a planet, is in a stable orbit, but is in the very first development stages, so it's going to be quite some time before there could be any life there. Possibly in our own technology, once we get off our planet, and then Venus is not that far away. That may, after Mars, which would probably be our first planet we'll inhabit, Venus could possibly be the second. At least it is a solid, hard planet, and it would be possible there if we could find some way to cool it down. So our technology may advance to that point sometime, and Venus, maybe somewhere in a couple thousand years, whatever, might be possible to control the environment there and habitate it. We might even be able to change its orbit and move it a little bit farther out or something so it was in a little bit cooler orbit than it is right now. Okay? So that gives us some vital statistics on Venus there that we might use to compare to other things. At the end of this contact, she told Billy some pretty good news. She said that they and the others had decided to take him with them, and they were going to be making a trip to the Pleiades and to another universe, a neighboring universe. And apparently there was a barrier between these universes, something built by the Timor race, which we'll hear more about later on, and they would be going through that. And Billy remarked, "Oh boy, we're going to go to the edge of the universe." And she said, "No, we do not search for the edge of the universe, because such does not exist." So apparently there's a barrier, a way to get between them, but there is no edge to our universe. Okay, I see we're coming to the end of this side of the tape, so you'll need to put in tape 3, and I'll see you there.